You know, centrists are like the bisexuals of politics. They claim to listen to both parties, but at the end of the day, they've played offside, which always makes them gay. Now, before I get into this, a couple of things. For the regular viewers, you know what we're in for here. For the new people, this might be rather harrowing, which will amuse me greatly. But I noticed some people were asking in the previous video, why do we pay attention to people like Dev and Destiny? Good question, allow me to explain. You see, in the land of the YouTubes, eyeballs and attention is basically your lifeblood. Imagine you saw a colossal train wreck and a crowd formed looking at it. You're essentially someone showing up with a megaphone going, "This is cringe and gay!" And you hope you make enough noise to grab other people's attention who go, "What? He thinks it's cringe and gay? I too think it's cringe and gay." And they listen to you. Also helps if you have a crowd already with you, because the crowd is a sort of signal you're potentially someone worth listening to. Helps your credibility. Once you have the eyeballs, though, whether you're a flash in the pan or you have staying power is ultimately up to you. Hopefully that explains that, and also why Destiny's name is in the title, because he will essentially be the animating avatar for this conversation. If you aren't up to speed, Destiny, the streamer, Wisdom of Wiki, slipped the mask a little too far in the wake of the Trump shooting fiasco and is now trying to rival Nick Rekieta as the villain of 2024, with a Canadian somewhere in the running as well. Oh yeah, and a guy faking cancer, but anyway. It's amazing the marksman isn't in the running for the title, isn't it? You know what else was strangely absent? Any talk in the media about the dangers of guns. Isn't that interesting? Seems guns being problematic depends on who they're being aimed at. And the melanin counter the one pulling the trigger. Now, with all of that being said, the purpose of this video is ultimately to perform a propaganda operation. And that operation involves drilling into your brain and finding whatever falsity animates your belief in this delusional thing you call free speech, and replacing it with a brand of propaganda called reality. And as such, I'm going to ask you all to do something rather challenging. Consider this digital anesthetic. Remove all notions of the US Constitution and everything connected to it from your mind. And most importantly, and I cannot stress this point strongly enough, for the love of all that is sane and holy, abandon the stupidly outdated concept of left and right. Clean, blank slate. We're going as bare bone as we possibly can here. What is speech in its rawest form? In essence, it's information, it's data. Think of how machines have hardware and software, language and coding, the means by which one communicates and makes use of the hardware. We use speech in much the same way. It's how we communicate with each other and interact about the world around us. It's pretty much our processing capacity. In many ways, the greater the speech capacity, the greater the potential processing power, at least when it comes to, say, abstracts and conceptualizing. Now here's the contentious part. Some machines have obsolete hardware, but they can be upgraded if the software is too advanced or intensive for the hardware, or potentially discarded altogether. Human beings, on the other hand, not so much, and you will find many people that can't run certain software. Software can't make better hardware. I'm not a believer in this myth of education because it's a load of bullshit. In the same way software can't make better hardware, the same way education can't magically transform an idiot into a genius. Quality seeds won't yield a fruitful harvest if the soil is barren. If you catch my drift. Oh, hi Uncle Eugene, how you doing? But anyway, from the raw bare-bone perspective then, learning the code of speech is essentially your operating system, and any speech you interact with via your sense of hearing or sight causes a reaction in your brain. So in this sense, there's no such thing as speech that has no consequence, because you're transmitting data that initiates a reaction, and the greater the processing capacity of your hardware, the greater your complexity can scale. That means your genetics, by the way. So far, so good? Now, a computer, provided you've installed some antivirus protection on it, will allow the machine to recognize certain files and programs as potentially harmful and or dangerous and react according to the programming. Has a databank of recognized threats. If it comes into contact with it, insert threatening input X equals corresponding safety response Y. This is what the antivirus system is designed to do. much the same way the human body marshals white blood cells to fight and defend itself when it meets certain pathogens. However, you also have these things called false positives, where the coding is scrambled and kind of wacky, and it falsely assumes malice and danger where there aren't any, and you potentially get useful things deleted. Human body also has a similar condition where it generates an excessive amount of white blood cells called leukocytosis. So let's look at the system that we have so far. Organisms with sensory capabilities, various levels of processing power, and defensive mechanisms. Now, we're going to scale this in complexity, so we'll start basic and apply this to multiple human beings trying to interact in harmony. So let's assume a small tribe. They all have the same operating system, the same antivirus, the same data bank of info to pull on when they encounter a pathogen. This lot shouldn't have too much of a problem syncing together harmoniously because they're all wired similarly with the same operating system. However, let's envision a different scenario where we have another set of people and their operating system has been tampered with, and along with this, their antivirus system also has a different data bank entirely. Now, as a consequence of these differences, they will process the information of speech in very, very disparate ways that might cause friction and unsavory repercussions. So let's examine how this would manifest in different situations. Try and apply this in a social setting, depending on the location, let's say a private establishment. Observe the relationship and/or ranks of a certain individual and/or people in the social hierarchy based on whatever variable, be this association, wealth, education, strength, profession, customer, etc., as well as the protocols put forth and maintained by the owner of the establishment and your expected behavior depending on the nature of your visit and presence. You know there's certain things that you can't say, as you will face repercussions depending on how grave the offense and the manner in which the offended parties wishes to express the severity of their grievances. Action causes reaction. In this instance, social shaming. But where profession is concerned, this can result in, say, the loss of revenue or being terminated. At the root of all of this, though, this is merely the enforcement of a certain standard. Now, should the situation escalate, however, let's say to the point of a physical altercation, for example, you put your faith in the security to handle the situation appropriately, because force is the ultimate arbiter of a dispute. And some offenses are so egregious they justify the use of force and ultimately some form of oppression, hence how you get law and order, crime and punishment. We'll get back to this point in a few moments. But let's go back to the coding example. Imagine a source capable of emitting sensory data that can contort and reprogram an operating system. Hypothetically, let's call them a college professor. Let's say a college professor introduces this warning code for the antivirus called fascism. Contrary to the post-Enlightenment code, human beings are not wired to be atomized individuals. We are social creatures, mammals, and we roam in packs. The reason for this databank entry, then, is to program a certain reaction. They don't need to know anything about what it means as far as theory or history goes. No. That's not the point of the databank entry. This is purely to install a very primitive friend-enemy distinction, which in part initiates the reaction animation. Considering these code-scrambling peasants called college professors promulgate their misdeeds at these institutions called universities, it is highly unlikely a mass of victims called students would deviate away from this newly ingested or reprogrammed code. Why would they? Everyone else around them has accepted the code as well, and they will very likely face repercussions for defying the will of the mob. Human beings by their nature are not antagonistic to groupthink. They prefer not to be alienated. Heaven's sake, most of them prefer not to think at all. As a consequence, they stay mentally static, hive mind. Make no mistake, human beings are by default, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Opening up the mind, embarking on a mental journey of learning new things that could bleed your world of its artificial high and cause social alienation? Where's the incentive to do any of that? Recognize that the capacity for most people to do this is rather rare. The desire to do so, considering the net gain to loss ratio, damn near non-existent. Take a look at all of you right now. Undoubtedly, many of you watching this are American, staunchly so. And yet here you are, listening to a forewarning foreigner openly tearing at your First Amendment thread by thread. Under any other circumstance, my words would suffice to land me the distinction of enemy and a threat to your way of life. If you managed to get this far without fleeting desires to maim me for my heresy, congratulations and well done to you. But speaking of threats and heresy, if you happen to possess a higher IQ, or at this point you're not brain damaged basically, you'll have been borderline immunized against this fascistic reaction protocol, or at the very least respond with yawning and a 6-letter slur. But you'll likely have seen the kinds of mindless drones that get animated and shriek like banshees upon hearing these words, chanting them in some cringe rhyme, etc., etc. Now imagine you're in a society where people have this weak operating system and this antivirus programming, and they are being spammed this warning code constantly. In what ways do you think this will damage their psyche, and how long can they maintain this before they're mentally debilitated by it? Or go crazy, who knows? The question to ask them: why is this code imprinting done at all, and who benefits from all of this? Who is the real enemy of this code? You can probably guess. So you now somewhat have a feel for the code, its utility and potential promulgator. In the absence of a religious code of conduct, and because the state has essentially eaten the religious cornerstone of Western civilization, people simply follow the whims of the regime. This is why you will get people who believe the current thing, even though it has nothing to do with the reality. Hell, in many ways it'll be contradictory to what they believed just a week ago, because they're simply told this is for the benefit of society, and they see people respected around them concur, and so they do as well, because they want to feel like they matter. It's social signaling, and yes, it really is that simple. You must then recognize that all you're witnessing is a bunch of drones animated by a code. They don't care for the function of the regime, merely that it exists as this abstract concept that maintains this facade that makes them feel all warm and fuzzy. This is why you can't teach people certain things, because not only can't they process the sensory data you're trying to relate to them, but because they simply have no functional use for it. Their operating system doesn't function on information, it's animated by power in accordance with the ecosphere they live in. But to go back to the example of the physical altercation in the private establishment, you're relying on a morally justified use of force to maintain a certain standard. If the force presently can't deal with it, you call the police. But all you're doing is outsourcing the force and kicking up the responsibility up the chain of command. The cancel culture gimmick is the exact same thing, only the morality has a different faction, maintaining the power of the offended party. That is the lesson here with regards to so-called free speech. In your civilization, who gets to decide what operating system and antivirus is the default one? Who wields power, and by what moral authority do you deem its forceful wielding a righteous cause? Which standards do you trust those who you bestow the power to ultimately enforce? Because here's the reality of human societies. We will always look up to and trust the authority of centralized figures of power. How funny it is to see these pathetic liberals who whine, "Oh, you're pro-cancel culture when your side does it, you're a bunch of hypocrites." Nah. What the hell are you talking about? You wankers are a bunch of evil bastards lamenting the fact that Shooter missed, and now you have the gall to call us unprincipled. You must be taking the piss. For once they straightened their spine, grew a pair of balls, and flexed power. That's not a lack of principles, that's them for once enforcing a standard and showing they actually have some principles. Cry more, you whiny-ass bunch of wankers. Cheers for watching, and once again, I apologize for nothing.